Welcome to the Love Conscious Human Podcast, your launchpad to cultivate and elevate your personal power. I'm your host, business strategist, and leadership coach, Dr. Terry. Let's have fun and jump right in. Okay, welcome to the Love Conscious Human Podcast. And today we have an amazing guest who is someone I've been working with for a little while and a great friend, Brian. Welcome.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me on.
Can you introduce yourself, please?
Of course. So I am CTO and partner at Komodo Technologies. We are a data R&D firm, and we help companies get more out of their data in terms of activating it to identify new opportunities for growth in their company, and even work on data science initiatives in their companies. Now, that sounds very technical and not human focused, but one of the things that we strongly believe in is in empowering our clients' employees with better tools and better techniques to get the most themselves, rather than depending on outsiders like us forever. So our approach to it is about as human oriented as you can get when you talk about people in our space. We're all about putting the tools into the hands of more and more people so that they can do and achieve more by themselves.
Yeah. So what I hear with that really is, so even though you get paid to fish, you still move forward and teach people how to do their own fishing.
Yes. I think that's a good analogy. I mean, very often, if I can extend that analogy a little bit, very often people come to us, they have no idea what a fishing pole looks like. And so they have an immediate need to get some of those fish. But of course, it doesn't go away. But that need doesn't go away. And in fact, the need to delve into more and more complicated things is increasing, and we see that just continuing at an increasing rate. And so our offering is we help to clear some of the immediate needs, address the immediate needs, and set our clients up for success when they are trying to address their future needs by themselves.
Yeah. Great. And so I'm really, thank you for coming here, and I'm really happy to have you. We have amazing conversations in session and in other circumstances as well. And I think the listeners will greatly benefit from our conversation about love and war consciousness. And just in case somebody's tuning in for the first time, I'm just going to reiterate the definitions of love and war consciousness. So war consciousness is the mindset or the point of view that self and other are separate. You and I are different. Somebody wins, somebody loses. It's a black and white, binary, dualistic mindset where we try to systematically capture, contain, and control things outside ourselves so that we don't have to sort of risk being vulnerable and on the path of being whole humans. And that's because that's emotional and touchy-feely. And so love consciousness is this other point of view, mindset, where we come to understand that we are all interdependent, where we are parts of a whole, that also from that place, we do not seek to, compete in the same way. What we do rather is we want to comprehend from a higher level, understand, come at problems with compassion and care, and try to find solutions rather than quick fixes, where all parties and parts benefit. It's sort of like the difference like war consciousness is kind of this net zero locust kind of thinking, where you just and you take what you want and you just leave behind you whatever, some dystopian landscape. And then love consciousness is this net positive way of being, kind of like a bee. They go about their business making honey and propolis and wax and all these things, very industrious. And on top of it, there's a net positive. They're pollinating and creating fruition wherever they go and touch and get what they need. And love consciousness, from my perspective and experience, is also kind of this natural state of nature and humanity. It's kind of like it resides in our hearts and not our heads so much. It's kind of this right brain creativeness rather than this left brain lockdown, just get it done, unit of productivity way of thinking. There you go. So you know all about this because we've been talking about this for quite some time, and I know you know you're also working on my reading my book. And so first off, for the listeners, can you tell us when you started understanding, let's say, war consciousness?
Sure.
What was that like?
So, I have been educated in math and computer science, and I take to that very, very well. And I also, do what I guess is a kind of recreational math in, playing games that force me to engage with systems, games like chess, backgammon, or bridge. These are very systematic thinking oriented things, and really, in the course of playing these games and developing an ability to play them well, you have to engage in some amount of reduction of a very complicated system into heuristics or rules of thumb that you can actually apply as a human. And there's a very great parallel between this and what we see in business and economic decisions that get made, as well as a variety of other situations where we're actually studying a system that's very, very complicated and nuanced, but the need to make a decision demands that we sort of reduce it down to some simple figures so that we can make that decision. So, I've come from, very practiced mindset of like applying these kinds of systematic thinking, numeric thinking, and reductive, and that becomes the sort of Maslow's hammer, if you will. If every tool, the saying is, if your only tool is a hammer, everything starts to look like a nail, right? Yep. So that becomes my omni tool for a lot of different scenarios. Now, the other part of it is also perhaps equally important, if not more important, which is this idea of what you said, net zero, or zero sum thinking, meaning that if I'm going to have more, whether it's power or wealth or longer life or more of something, necessarily there has to be losers in that scenario. I have to be taking it from somebody else. Pretty much all games are set up this way, and very often we see this warlike thinking where we're engaging with systems where we know, people know consciously, okay, I am winning because they are losing.
Yeah.
Right? And also very often it happens unknowingly, right? We don't, we are participating in a system that's been set up in a way that in order for me to win, it's necessary for others to lose. So that's how my awareness of it has, that's sort of where I stand in my awareness of it, and how my, past ways of thinking have sort of, how I'm reevaluating my mindset and my way of looking at the world from the past.
Yeah. And I think there's a good point that you're making. All of the things that you described here are kind of these everyday things, right? Because The socialized mind is very war conscious. And it's so like, it's only when you start to self-author and step out of the socialized mind where you start to think critically, think for yourself, have creativity, innovation, really all that sort of outside the box thinking. That happens because we get into the creative right mind and the actually what I call love consciousness, where you're integrating a lot more complexities into how you think about stuff. It's way more open-minded, and you take a lot more things into consideration. It's more like a constellation of how to find a solution rather than that just, well, there's a thing, hammer, boom, we're done. Like that. I like the way you talked about like the reductionist thinking. Yeah.
Yeah, and when we think about making the right decision in the face of something very complicated, right? If we're going to come up with a formula, the formula is going to demand that we put a certain level of precision on our calculations in order to arrive at a number that can then be compared to another number, and then we can choose the greater of those numbers or the lesser of the numbers, depending on whether you're measuring good or evil, right? But that sort of need for precision and numeric definition, I think basically invariably is costing us accuracy, meaning
Yes.
that we come up with a more precise measurement, but it's actually not honing in on the right target. We're
Yeah.
honing in on the target that's here, but we ought to be over here.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think that a lot of folks, especially folks in the software and business spheres, I think make the mistake of um, you know generating precision when they're asked to help to make a more accurate decision.
Yeah. When you say accurate, I'm thinking more like a creative solution.
Um, I'm thinking accurate in terms of like, is this closer to right?
To the
We'll
need,
just hmm?
to solving a need, to when you say accurate, like like the target, we have a targeted desired outcome, which is a human need or solving a
Yeah,
problem.
that's right. So if you have a target outcome, like let's say reforestation, then you can say, well, what should I do in my power to help reforest maybe a
Mm-hmm.
particular area, right? So you might come up with a precise, very prescriptive set of steps, but that might not actually be getting you closer to a methodology that works, um, because the methodology that works might be much more difficult to define, more
Yes.
difficult to put prescriptions on. And in fact, we do see that. I mean, there have been cases where we are looking at numbers and the numbers are telling us that reforestation is happening, but really what's happening is that somebody defined a goal, which is plant 20,000 trees. And somebody came in and said, great, I can plant 20,000 trees. Well, were they the right trees? Were they the right trees for the climate? Were they planted in a way that actually facilitates forest growth? Or were they planted in a way that is more suitable for like an orchard, which needs maintenance and like lots of people to watch over it? So this idea of a forest as being defined by a certain number of trees, I think that misses the point. And
It's too
so
reductionist.
it's too simple, right? And yeah, a more accurate approach would probably be difficult to communicate and set a group of people in motion on, because there's so much nuance and there's so much complexity in the ecosystem of a forest. And so there's a problem. How do you rally enough people towards the cause, without sort of
Right.
inventing something that maybe even goes against your stated purpose.
And I love where you went with that because it's like, okay, at the end of the day, it's about how do you rally enough people to work together, right?
Yes.
So that we can actually use what we all know or, together. And that's also the part of, and that's so fundamentally love conscious in the way of solving problems is that you're looking beyond the Excel sheets and the Gantt charts and all of the things we learn when we do business and we're trying instead of trying to reduce reality to line items, we step out of it and say, okay, yeah, those are useful momentarily or for short-term kinds of things. But the minute we step out and make it a much larger problem or maybe solution too, it has to do with our interconnectivity. It has to do with how we all come together and how do we look at something bigger than us. And so we have to step out of the reductionist thinking mind into the creative right mind, which is fundamentally love conscious. And it's a little more messy.
Yeah. Yes, it is. And it's also scary to think, if you are in a position where you're an executive at a company. It's scary to think that it's actually not effective for you to set objectives for your employees because, well, that might be your hammer in your particular context, right? So there's this also necessity to embrace fuzzier goal setting and empower people throughout an organization to use their human judgment rather than just aim for numeric targets that have been set for them. And there's a lot of let's say concern about jumping into an alternative to what people know. And I think I think that this is also related to basically struggles to adopt alternatives to what to some of the techniques we have out there. Main one I'm thinking about, is probably because I'm coming from software background, is agile.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's also like something else we can talk about that I think that, and I'm pretty sure you are also passionate about, which is sort of how we humans have evolved to be more and more conscious. So I'll just give a really quick recap on that for our listeners, just so they can frame this out a little bit. So hundreds of years ago, whatever, we were tribes. And so tribes, villages, small groups working together. And at that time, the mind was different. We thought of ourselves and others differently. We didn't have this divisiveness that we have now in the same way. So if my baby was sick, I would go to the medicine man and say, my family's sick, and present the baby. If my neighbor was having trouble, and didn't have enough to eat, well, I would go someplace and ask for help, saying, my village or my tribe needs help, right? Because the self was larger. We had a sense of interdependence, and it wasn't me and the exterior world. So that's like the fundamental break of self that has happened and been augmented over generation to generation to generation in as we modernize, as economies shift, as we go global, whatever you want, like whatever.
Yep.
The story of civilization and humanity. And so now we've got a different type of self. And as an individual, we think that we're actually individual. which is kind of silly because if you think of the pandemic, if there's anything to teach us that we were interconnected and interdependent, I think the pandemic would have kind of been a really good case study.
Yeah, yeah, and yeah, to me, there's two things that come to mind that are contributing to this. One is um, one is the nuclear family and the way that um, the automobile and then the development of car centric suburbs, um, created a sort of mobility for people here in the United States to basically not be connected to their home community, to sever that connection basically whenever they wanted to. Kind of leads to these areas where there's thousands of families all trying to be independent of one another, fighting their interdependence and in the spirit of a certain kind of idea of self-sufficiency.
Right. Right.
The other force that I think of is a sort of extreme interpretation of capitalism,
Mm-hmm.
where capitalism is not about advancing humans.
Mm-hmm.
It's about advancing capital. If it was about advancing humans, it would be called humanism. And so we hope that our system of capitalism is sufficiently aligned with human desires, and we hope that through certain sets of regulations and social contracts. But fundamentally, there's a certain amount of you know looking at capital as the primary unit of value, um, to the extent where it seems like in a lot of cases, it's not the people that own capital, but it's a capital that owns people.
Yes. Yes, I love where you're going with this because we do have this, um, we have this extreme capitalism, this pyramidal extraction model with like the few wealthy or and powerful, whatever, those who hold and own all of the money, basically, that like rent out the money to all of us with interest, so we can try to live our lives and so that we can, work in their factories or whatever. And this whole system is actually a system that's based on, monetary policy around interest. And
Mhm.
it's really incredible how we have and then this is so war conscious, which which is why we're getting into so much trouble in the planet because we're propagating this mindset and thinking that it's okay to because we're doing some country good, we go in and we like locusts, we turn common property or water or air or forest or whatever, we turn them into they go from land to being property and from property to being money, and then at the end we've exhausted natural resources. The community no longer has commons that were sustaining them with food or water or hunting or fishing or different kinds of agriculture, whatever. And now all of those people have to find a way to earn money to buy food, and so we're doing that, and we're just doing it in more and more extreme and complex ways,
Yeah,
so that everything that was normally free was of common use, it
yeah,
now becomes private property, and that property becomes money. And then some people are just holding on to basically the property of the world that has been converted into money, is now this big, massive amount of money that's being held in the hands of a few, relatively few individuals. This is not,
yeah.
it's nutty. It's
Right.
a machine that's devouring, and even the people at the top don't even necessarily understand what they're doing. They're just obeying the rules of the system.
Exactly. Exactly. So, couple of directions to go with this. I want to focus on the people who are not necessarily aware of what's happening because I think this is where, this is touching on the point I was getting to where the capital owns the people in some way, meaning that the decisions that are being made, there are systems in place like our stock exchanges that sort of incentivize managers of assets to act in certain ways. And if they stop acting in those ways, well, they're going to be out. And the next guy is going to come in, the guy who is going to comply with the demands of the machine.
Right.
And we see, I think, very few, at least in the popular mind, very few counterexamples of this. And the ones that we do see, such as Elon Musk, a lot of the people who are, not so pleased to see what the invisible hand of the free market is saying, they also look at what he's doing and they say, well, wait, I don't like that either. So now there's a sort of conflict, right? Like, you don't necessarily like what the free market says, but maybe the alternative is worse, right? If
Well,
somebody is
yeah,
bucking what the free market says,
I
and,
think
and
that goes back to the socialized mind. So 80% of humanity at any given point in time is in the socialized mind. Now, if you're in a self-authoring mind, you're in the critical thinking, you're doing like, wait a minute, what's going on? And that's kind of where we're trying to subsist at this particular moment in this conversation. But the socialized mind is just a bunch of constructs, prefab constructs about who we are, how we should show up, what we should do, how we should behave, what we should think. And so it's not capital that's the problem. It's the way we think about and choose to use capital that is the problem. Money is not a problem in itself. It's how we're using it from that war conscious mindset as a weapon or leverage. We even call it leveraging.
yeah.
Like I'm highly leveraged at the bank. That's what
Hmm.
we say. Well, yeah, the bank's gotcha. You know, like, yeah, that's a weapon. So
Yeah.
it's how we're using it and how we're choosing to transact in this zero sum equation. And to pop out of that, we have to get into our right minds and love consciousness. We can't solve this problem from the reductionist left brain war conscious mindset.
Yes. So, but I guess, I agree with you. It's not about capital is bad. It's about how do we use capital and how do we use like, what do we do to express our influence on the way that all of these, tools, factories, communities, natural resources, how do they get used, right? And so I think one of the most important ways that people sort of contribute to the group decisions that get made is one that has a big impact on largest companies is through the stock market. There's investment directly and indirectly in companies, and technically there are boards and things that allow people to vote on who's going to be the chairman and who's going to be the head officers in the companies, right? But mostly these companies, they're trying to uh, you know chase what the market says is valuable or not valuable, and I think it's needs a I think you said that we need people to change their mindset from into the right mind, right? But how does that show up? I think it has to show up in the way that markets are regulated, and also the way that people choose to spend their money in the markets.
Yes, both of those things. So yeah, because we do need certain, so because this pyramidal system needs periodically to be readjusted, right? Because at some point, there's just too much money in the hands of two, and then it will collapse. It's like a multi-level marketing thing. At some point, the pyramid will collapse if there's too much money at the top and not enough resources at the bottom, it will collapse. So as we move forward, there's a couple of things that I see happening, not just on the technical thing where we need to behave differently and we need regulations to make the market and the people who are controlling the money behave better or differently. We also need to look at what business is doing. And for me, it's all about the net positive movement. It's about so net positive manufacturing, regenerative farming, regenerative health. I'm a big fan of that because it actually brought me back from very dire circumstances. So I know it works. All of these things where it's actually not just having the transaction of goods and goods, services, exchange kind of thing with money, but no, we're actually adding to the way we do things where people are growing and getting educated and doing better. And a simple example of, let's say, net positive, close to a net positive product. I order these ridiculously expensive natto made to order beans, these fermented soybeans. And I'll get a little case of them, and they come with little freezer packs in there to keep it cold. But the freezer packs are full of a kind of carbomer kind of gel, which is actually a fertilizer. So they've used a natural substance, nitrogen-based gel, non-toxic, more than non-toxic, it's actually a form of fertilizer. So when they thaw, I clip off the corner and I go out and I literally put it on my vegetables or my flowers, and it's a gel and it just soaks in. So I'm left with a little plastic bag. That's it. Okay, I do recycle that obviously, but it's not 100% not net, but you see that they're moving in that direction.
Sure.
And it's where actually in business, they start to think more holistically and more right mind creatively. And again, the whole love consciousness, caring about outcomes of outcomes of outcomes, and not just what am I getting out of it. My Nespresso pods. So I get my Nespresso pods from Nespresso. Coffee inside, they're aluminum pods. I use it, make my coffee, drink my coffee. I'm left with a pod, which is aluminum, and now the coffee's been used. They send me a recycle bag, which is a prepaid FedEx bag. I put all that in, tape it up, and I can just give it to the FedEx guy, or I can also drop it off at one of the stores that sells the pods and the machines, local. And they said all that gets recycled. The aluminum goes to make more aluminum pods that I'm going to get reused. So they're reclaiming all of their aluminum, or as much as possible, so they don't have to go out and buy more aluminum to make their pods. Smart. And then the coffee gets separated from it, and that goes either into composting for farms, or now they have other outlets where it's a raw material for making biodegradable tennis shoes. Some European firm is making biodegradable tennis shoes and needs coffee grounds. So this is where we start to embrace an understanding of this interconnectivity, and we start to integrate it into the way we manufacture, the way we grow. And what I love about it is that it copies nature. Nothing is lost. Like it's that, again, I'm kind of looking here into circular economics, right? It's nothing is lost. It just keeps going around and gets used for something else and then becomes something else as much as possible.
Yeah. I mean, there's there's a certain amount of recapture. I guess, like, the sort of like physicist in me is insisting that, okay, with all this processing and all this, distribution of pods and then recollection
Mhm.
of pods, there's some heat wasted. Thermodynamic laws apply, right?
Yep.
And so it's to me, it seems like an improvement on a what was once a bad situation. But the original bad situation is very, I think, very cynically created, and which I think is this Nespresso system and the Keurig, which of course it was the predecessor. Really, if I one way that I can think about it is an effort to sort of centralize a value generating activity that was distributed,
Yes.
making coffee, originally distributed value generating process. But they've centralized part of it, the grinding and dosing and certain parts of preparation, so that they can deliver you the capsule. And then suddenly this creates an ecological problem. Well, what do you do with all these damn capsules? I think that, like, if we didn't have people working really hard to try to like capture that value generating activity so they could extract a little bit of profit out of it in the first place, we wouldn't need to then suddenly have all this thinking and building of infrastructure to defray that ecological cost. So, I want, I think, like, for me, I think it's even better if we even resist the temptation to create this value capture and centralization business models in the first place.
Yeah.
But we're going in exactly the opposite direction, where, okay, so for example, if you had a problem with your Nespresso machine, it broke, what would your chances be of being able to repair it so you don't have to take that chunk of plastic, electronics, and metal and just basically write it off as waste?
Mhm.
Probably close to zero.
Right.
And of course, there's even bigger things that need to be repaired, like tractors for farming.
Mhm.
And you know what John Deere is doing about that, right? They
Yeah.
are making it so that it's impossible to repair, and you even can't decide as a farmer, okay, I know it needs repairs, but I don't have time for that right now because I got to harvest. So they have to hack their own systems because there's protections in place to prevent repairs from occurring, prevent the actual activity that's going to reduce the waste. So I think, and this is going all into a right to repair. There's obviously a backlash to this in the
Yeah.
right to repair movement, that goes not just about tractors, but that's sort of the most salient thing, but to computers, phones, other electronics, printers. Printers are infamous for spearheading this sort of effort to capture with different techniques that make it so that you have to buy their cartridges, you can't buy something else. Shavers, a lot of so-called business innovation is trying to figure out ways to make the system less efficient, but in a way that helps the company capture more of that data, or not data,
Well, data
capture more of
too.
that value generating activity. There's a certain amount of data capture as well, but mostly it's about making it impossible for somebody to get more mileage out of their $200 printer
Yeah.
by rolling up their sleeves and like learning how to service their own printer.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love this rant because I'm totally with you on that. But I don't think that we're going to change fast enough. So I think that it's understanding that it's this movement towards regeneration. Maybe there's also a movement in economics where we do start to decentralize that value capturing activity. And when we say value capturing, it's actually not value, it's money capturing, where we get the money.
Yeah,
Yeah, how do we get,
the money follows the value.
well, yeah, hopefully.
Is a common way of thinking about it.
Yeah. I do sometimes argue that value and money are two separate things.
I agree.
Yeah. But then there's also like one of the examples that I absolutely love to use is about, and I know you're going to jump in on this, intellectual property. Because and I was just talking to somebody this morning about certain certain peptide therapies that I know are being stopped or withheld, um, that are not out yet and not may never see the light of day, because they would heal something, they would heal or cure or dramatically reduce a certain disease. And then this would then mean that all of these people that are on these chronic pills forever would not be able to, wouldn't need to buy all these pills. So with that, so if we have something that you can cure your disease in a series of 5 shots, and that might actually do it for you, or maybe it might last 5 years, and you wouldn't take, you know, hundreds of thousands, hundreds of dollars worth of meds. So there's, you know, pharmaceutical interests don't want you to do this. And I thought of something that was like polio. So when
Hmm.
polio came out, those scientists said, no, we're not going to put an IP on that. Like, let's stop the disease. So that's what happened to polio.
Yeah. Yeah. Very famously, the inventor sold the patent to he sold the patent for $1 to an institution that he believed would not leverage it for profit.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And similarly, in technology, the internet protocol that was the basis of opening up the whole internet and making it possible for everybody to have internet access. Well, that was a scientist who wanted to talk to another scientist who just wanted their documents to be able to like be in the same format so they could see each other's work. And so he invented this and handed it out,
Hmm.
gave it away. And with that, at that time, only military governments had internets. And then boom, the internet boom happened simply because he gave away a certain technology.
Yeah. Yeah. And, on the topic of intellectual property, I, of course, as a primarily producer of software, right? If I think of myself as someone who makes software for a living, it sounds very dangerous for me to think that we would be better off if we abolished the idea of intellectual property. We banned secret keeping from one another, so that we could all take advantage of the ideas that had been created, such as the ideas behind the polio vaccine. But I find myself, going closer and closer to that really extreme conclusion, as time goes on. And I know it may not be realistic. I think there are many
Practical
things
right
that I would like
now.
to. There are many things that I dream of that don't feel realistic, and I don't think that we're going to, solve the problems of our current systems. Uh, you said in time, I think, and so I think actually there's, one future that I'm trying to think about preparing myself for is what do I need to do now to prepare myself for a future where I can't support my own life by producing software anymore for whatever reason.
Mhm.
So, how am I going to eat? How am I going to be able to see a doctor, right? How do I solve these problems? It's yeah, there's a little bit of a sort of, well, that's not really getting into love consciousness, I suppose. Getting
Well, I think
falling.
no, I think there is something here because what you're pointing at is the tension. And we're not
Yes.
there yet. As humanity is not there yet. We have to be clear that, I mean, when it comes to love consciousness, we are in kindergarten, barely, maybe preschool. I don't know. because we are so steeped in the war consciousness and the need to capture, contain, and control things in order to survive economically and be like, yes, I can, my body, I have to pay bills and I need doctors and I need food and I have loved ones that I also need to take care of because, that's what we do. And so I think that we are so reduced ourselves in the reduction that comes with war consciousness. We are centuries away from actually really understanding and embracing love consciousness.
Yeah.
War consciousness rules here now. That's it. But we can start to talk about it. We can start to look at it. We can start to understand it and look at how maybe in the past we were not quite so war conscious. And what are the things we could do now that would lead to a more love conscious future for our children, if we love them? Things like, well, maybe certain things shouldn't be IP'd. Maybe we shouldn't have intellectual property of somebody's DNA or certain medications, or, we need to factor in other factors that are love conscious, like we might talk about sustainability. Well, I think we need to start talking about net positive, or let's talk about, the consequences of the consequences of the consequences. Let's think a little farther. We have the capability to do that. And also we as humans, well, you know what? If you're okay and you have enough money and you do happen to come up with some nice little invention, or you come up with some nice thing, maybe you don't have to make millions off of it. If you're okay, maybe you should give it away. Why not? I give away my stuff all the time. You still have to pay for a book because I have to pay Amazon to make the book, but I'm happy to give away. We're giving away this conversation. We're giving away our thoughts. We can give away our love, our thoughts. We can gift each other all kinds of things and help by modeling the model of what it is to be in a more gift society where not everything is a transaction. And I think by that, we start to lean into that love consciousness. And that's where we start to rebuild the family, the community, the sense of tribe, and also recognize our interdependence and be like, well, if we are interdependent, maybe I should also take care of you, because what happens to you will affect me. And I think it's more just a question of leaning, because it's going to take hundreds of years for us to really do that. It's like some episode of Star Trek. It's not going to happen.
Well, you know that I love Star Trek, and yeah, I think the sort of imagined path to the society that they have in the show was through horrible collapse of civilization and then a period of extreme fascist governments across the globe. So I won't say what our future holds, but the utopian vision that they propose is well, it's a little bit frightening to get there the way that they thought it would have to occur.
Well, hopefully we can get there with less suffering and less destruction if we start to think about love consciousness now, so that we don't have to be quite so war conscious. Maybe we could ease some of the transition.
Maybe.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. But anyway, it was great having you here today. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's a pleasure.
Yeah. Love talking to you.
Same. All right. Take care.
Thanks for listening to this episode from start to finish. It is always a pleasure to reach a fellow love-conscious human. If you want to expand on your consciousness education, check out the book, Flip Your Switch, on Amazon, and the courses on loveconscioushuman.com. Or you can book a private coaching session with me. We hope you'll join us again. Be sure to subscribe and leave a review. Let's come together to crowdsource a love-conscious world.